Okay, you know, one big trap that people can fall into is needing a spiritual awakening so they can start like trusting their actual experiences. I think that's pretty weird. You know that I have now that I have actual like one-on-one experience with people, I definitely see this a lot, especially when people just kind of need reassurance that whatever they're going through it properly. And really, doubt is just a thought. Doubt is just being in your head and wondering. Doubt is just the mind trying to figure things out. You can just say doubt is being afraid of the unknown. And the only thing that wants to know really is the mind, because direct experiences don't really know something concretely as an idea. You just know it directly. I don't know if that makes sense. It's it's something that's always in your experience, but it's definitely hard to overlook when you're in your head all the time. But anyway, the main point of this video is just that it's really weird to watch other people and just people in general, I've noticed, just having this sense of doubt that they need reassurance or someone else to confirm that what they're going through is okay or that it makes sense or that nothing's gone wrong. And in this context, about either having or wanting a spiritual awakening and using that as a reason to either think you're right or think you're wrong. Like, I haven't had an awakening, so I can't trust myself fully. That's just an opinion. An opinion is just another thought in your head. You can have the other effect, which can be pretty hazardous, where I've had an awakening, so I must know more or better than someone else, which is just another thought. We're trying to point to something that's not better or worse, not more or less, something that's not really without an opposite. And I don't know what to talk about first. Either I haven't had one, so I can't trust myself, which is pretty interesting, especially watching people. Because when I'm with people, I don't really care if people had awakening or not. I don't care if people are enlightened or not. That I used to, but that was a long time ago. There's just not a thought in my head that wonders, have they had this? Have they not had this? I don't care because it's just another concept. It doesn't really matter because what's here is literally what's here right now and obvious. But when I talk to certain people, especially people in non-dual or certain spiritual communities, there's always that sense of, awakening or enlightenment will reassure me of something. And there's just this sense of, why can't you do that now? And in a way, it's already happening now, but when you're in your head, you really look past the obvious sense of what's here. And you really don't need that doubt. Because when you are in doubt, that's when you're back in your head. Doubt is just the mind trying to understand. There's nothing wrong with doubt. I can still have doubts about really practical things like, I'm really bad at counting money, so I doubt if I count money properly, and I definitely double, sometimes triple check. Did I count the money right? I'm not sure, but it's a very playful kind of doubt instead of it's the end of the world kind of doubt. Yeah, I still have doubt, but that's just from seeing, I'm pretty bad at counting money, so don't ask me to do this. Anyways, if you haven't had a spiritual awakening, I personally don't think it matters much, because even spiritual awakening is another concept. It points to something really profound, really just losing identification with the mind. There might still be a sense of a self, someone guiding or pointing or doing everything. But that's for maybe something else. Because self and ego can differentiate. That's a pretty big topic, and I don't want to go over that. I'm more here to talk about people doubting themselves because they haven't had an awakening, and it becomes an issue when you rely on someone else for guidance, which is guidance is great because I've definitely had guidance, and I enjoy guiding people. Problem is, don't put like the key to this freedom in someone else's hands because no one's having your experience but you. And while someone can give advice, the person you should trust the most should always be yourself. And that's really what this is pointing to. Trying to get you back away from the ideas of what you think you should do and back into the immediacy of what's happening and trusting that over your ideas of what should be happening. And even if you haven't had like a big blown up, blissed out awakening, Kensho, Satori, stream entry, all these there's a bunch of words for spiritual awakening. Even if you've never had one of these, it really doesn't matter too much. There are definitely people who, I know they know what I'm talking about, even though they can't point to a moment they've had this big awakening moment. And it's great because I've also listened to other teachers talk like there are people they don't know if they had this, but the way they talk, the way they move, the way they are in the world, it's pretty obvious that they're not identified with their minds. And that's really what all this is pointing towards. You don't have to have the big bliss, the big awakening. I had that, but that's just for me. I definitely know of people and or talk to people who are like, they're so clear, and yet I've asked them about this, and they're like, I've never had anything like that. So you don't really have to doubt yourself if there's no big awakening or big euphoria because even talking to people and having one-on-ones with people like you're pretty clear, like I don't got to say anything. You're if anything you're just clearing up your own clarity, and I've never once really doubted you. It's just I hope you can let go of your own doubt and see the clarity that's already here because it's pretty obvious to me when people aren't overshadowed by their own doubt. Honestly, if we're talking about traps of wanting a spiritual awakening, there's also the trap of believing you had one, or rather, not believing you had one, but using your awakening as a way to put yourself above people. Because truth isn't about feeling good. You can feel amazing and not be in truth. There are people that take pleasure in the pain of other people. So we're kind of trying to differentiate pain and pleasure. Wait, pain and no, I mean pleasure and well, I don't know how to word this, but pleasure and you can call it intimacy. Something that's it's so obvious it couldn't be any other way. It's so direct. And pleasure is great, but it's not truth. So feeling good doesn't mean you're closer to truth in the same way that feeling bad doesn't mean you're farther from truth. Because truth is something that can't be avoided. It's something that's unavoidable and so obvious. But the judgment of being close or far, that's when you're back in your head. Feeling bad can still be in truth, even though things aren't pleasurable. Truth doesn't really distinguish from pleasure or pain, doesn't have a preference. But on a practical level, you can still have your own preferences. I would definitely prefer to be in a comfortable bed or comfortable at home compared to a really distressful situation or not having enough money to afford things like food. So practical preferences are fine. It's just truth isn't limited to the practical stuff. If you've had an awakening and you really feel like you've gone above, you're back in your head again. Even though you've had a moment of seeing clearly that the mind or what the mind presents isn't real, it can always reassert itself. And that's one of the dangers of the more euphoric kinds of awakening, or someone that's at that euphoric bliss. They can use that as a leverage point to say, I should know, or I do know better. Maybe they wouldn't think that they should. There's a chance someone could fully believe they know better. But if there's ever a comparison, like better or worse, there's only better or worse in the mind. So if someone has had such an amazing experience, such as an awakening, and there's a hierarchy, then they're still on some level still in their head. Because when things are silent, there's no comparison really. On a practical level, you can still compare, but it's not from a place of judgment, not better or worse, on a hierarchy of good or bad. Because I can still make judgments. Like using a screwdriver wouldn't work to hammer in a nail pretty well. It doesn't mean you give up your practical good sense. But there's no sense of something is better or worse, or someone is superior or inferior. Honestly, at this point, I don't know what I'm pointing toward. It's nice to talk about this. I'm trying to remember this quote. I haven't heard this in a long time. I remember Eckhart Tolle saying something along the lines of comparison is always ego, even a negative comparison. People always say having a big ego, but having a small ego is also ego. And really, we're trying to point past that. My memory is so bad, I honestly forgot what I've just said the entire time. But when there's no fixation on having to be a certain way, it's pretty nice. If there's any concluding remark, you can trust yourself, you know. And trusting yourself doesn't mean being superior, also doesn't mean being inferior. It's trusting yourself in a way you're really intimate with what's happening. You can differentiate the idea of what should be happening or what you want to be happening from what is happening. And yet the shoulds and wants don't have to be let go of. They can be present. They just don't have to be believed. Because the mind isn't the enemy. It doesn't need to be silent in order for you to be peaceful. The silence where you need actual quiet is a silence opposed to noise. Yet there's a silence that's always silent, even when there's noise or activity. And that's what I'm trying to point towards. And what if you had an awakening or don't think you have? This is something I'd like to point to. This awakening or no awakening really doesn't matter. You just notice the silence that's always here. Whether you've had a big moment or not. Bye.